Let's have a good show.
Blog Talk Radio.
Listening to Call Talk for Wednesday, February 2nd, 2011. Today's topic is quality assurance. Call monitoring your agents will love. If you're listening live, we invite you to be a part of the show and ask questions. And here's how you do it. You can email us at brian@benchmarkportal.com or chat with us on calltalk.tv. And if you're listening on the phone or just close to one, call in at 347-857-3117. Make sure to press the number 1 on your phone to let me know that you have a question, and I'll do my best to get you in. Everyone who asks a question on the show today, whether through email or phone, will receive a free copy of Bruce's book, Benchmarking at its Best. And one person will be chosen at random to win an in-depth reality benchmarking report valued at $1,500. I'd like to remind everyone that all of our shows are archived and available to listen to at calltalk.tv at any time of the day. And now, I'd like to introduce the host of Call Talk, Bruce Belfiore.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome back to Call Talk, everyone. As Brian mentioned, today's topic is quality assurance. Call monitoring your agents will love. Today we have brought in an expert on the topic for you, Lisa Courteau. And by the way, Lisa wins the prize for the most vowels in the last name.
I tried.
Well, she's a graduate of St. Cloud State University. And after several years of working as a news reporter in St. Cloud, then the clouds parted and Lisa saw the light and began her career in the call center industry, where she's remained for over 2 decades. She has 15 years of experience implementing and managing call quality improvement initiatives, and most recently, Lisa's managed the call quality practices and training initiatives for over a dozen programs at Carlson Marketing worldwide. She was responsible for introducing and implementing a call quality evaluation program and onboarding new monitoring technology. So she really has a 360-degree view of this. She increased the productivity of the quality team by over 45% and created an environment where the agents actually look forward to and appreciate receiving performance feedback, really the holy grail of this whole area. Lisa's been a featured speaker on quality monitoring and has also been a presenter at the incoming Call Center Management National Conference. She's currently collaborating with industry expert Dane Peterson on a call quality monitoring program best practices workshop. So it's my real pleasure to welcome Lisa Courteau.
Well, thank you, Bruce. It certainly is a pleasure to be here and just to have a chance to talk with you about what I've been doing for the past 2 decades.
Okay. No, we're really happy to have you on board. And Lisa, I think we all know that quality monitoring programs are really an essential element of good call center operations. And since you spent so much time in your career with these practices, I just wanted to ask you, what led you to focus on this aspect of call center operations?
Well, Bruce, it actually came about because of some frustrations that I was having as a training manager. Supervisors would come up to me and say, we really need some training on customer service soft skills, but they really couldn't give me any specifics regarding what kind of skills or behaviors that were lacking. So I would generate a general skills training class, and I'd have these agents in the classroom, and they'd look up at me and go, well, I already do this stuff. Why am I even in this classroom? So, far be it from me as the training facilitator to say, well, your supervisor says you don't do this or that, So I went back to the supervisors and I said, well, let's look at the quality program, and found it really wasn't a well-designed program. So the first step I took was actually just to redesign the form in an effort to help the supervisors really specifically identify what skills and behaviors were lacking. And that allowed me then to customize some training modules and then also measure the effectiveness of my training. Actually, that was my first step into the quality arena, and that was a pretty easy problem to solve compared to some of the challenges that we face today.
Yeah, and you mentioned the supervisors, and it comes up again and again in Call Talk, just how much of a linchpin they are in terms of making sure that the agents are as good as they can be and making sure that the communication inside the call center is done well. And And let's face it, in this case, who likes to be criticized? If you are going into a monitoring situation or a coaching situation and you feel like you're being criticized, that just doesn't feel good. So I'm sure you've come up with some techniques or some thoughts on how to best do that. Could you share that with us?
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges that you face is the first introduction a new agent in a call center gets to quality assurance is when somebody comes to them and puts a form in front of their face and says, here's your score. So it's kind of, who wants that? You're under so much pressure when you start as a new agent anyway, and that just encourages that whole big brother kind of environment where, the agents are saying you're too nitpicky, you're just looking for, things that I'm doing wrong. So you really need to get in front of those agents immediately when they come in the door. I mean, I'm a big one for always saying, look and use what you have around you. One of the big things that's with call centers is they usually have a high attrition rate. So you have ample opportunity all the time when you have new people coming in to get in front of them and really introduce the kind of culture around your program that's going to build that appreciation.
Right, and that culture really needs to be one where the agent is seen as a resource to be developed and improved for their own good as well as the good of the company, and not just somebody to be criticized for their faults. Isn't that so?
Oh, absolutely. I know you have to also be careful with how you approach it even with the terminology. One of the greatest successes that I've seen is when the quality monitoring team didn't introduce themselves or come across as a quality assurance team, because just those words can kind of put pressure on someone. It's like, oh, it's quality assurance. You're going to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. What they did is they changed their name, and they called themselves the Skills Enhancement Team. I mean, what can be better? You're a new agent. You're sitting there maybe first 2 weeks in a training class. Someone comes in and says, hey, I'm on the Skills Enhancement Team, and I'm here, and my only job is to make sure that you are successful. I mean, it just puts a totally different perspective on what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Right. I think sometimes the words really can make a huge difference. In fact, we like to throw Molotov cocktails into the industry every once in a while. And one of the things that I have suggested is that in some cases supervisor might be changed to agent advocate. In other words, you are really there to advocate for your agent, to develop them as much as possible. If there's a pay-for-performance component to their pay, then you're there to help them make as much as possible. And if not, then you're there to help them get the best quality scores possible so that they do well for their end-of-the-year review. And just sort of changing, and also changes the mindset of the supervisor, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think with a quality program, you can really use that to your advantage. I mean, if you're going to take all this time and you're going to, have this form and evaluate the agents, well, make sure that form is set up and it's aligned with what performance evaluations are. Performance evaluations usually end up resulting in some sort of a pay increase, hopefully, for most individuals. So if you can say, we're going to have this quality program. If you do these things, this is what we expect, this is what you're going to get reviewed on, and this is what your pay increase is going to be based off of. I mean, that's pretty powerful buy-in from an agent perspective.
Right. And it gets very personal, too. I think it's almost the sort of thing where if we have any supervisors listening or even managers who are talking continually to their supervisors, when that agent looks into the eyes of the supervisor or agent advocate, what do they see? Do they see someone who is trying to, tamp down on them, or somebody who is trying to develop them? And it's really that important. When they look into your eyes, what do they see? And what do they feel when they hear what you have to say? I think that's really, really so important. And, another aspect of it, too, is keeping it fresh for your long-term agents. So even though there's obviously a huge element of making sure that your new agents take this relationship, this coaching, this advocacy in the right way, there's also the fact that you have long-term agents who are maybe B-plus type folks, and for whom keeping this fresh has to be a very big task for a lot of supervisors. What are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
Well, that's where it's important that you really make sure that the agents also understand what the strategy is behind the quality program you've got in place. They need to be able to see that what I'm doing is going to make a difference, and that what I'm doing is really aligned with what the company's trying to accomplish as well. You move them with a more long-term agent. You got to kind of move them out from, this is just you listening to my calls to see how I'm doing, into, well, what is this doing overall for the organization? And that's where communication is so key as well. And you also need to get into more of that recognition, recognizing where do you have these senior agents and utilizing them. I mean, they've got the experience on the phone. What can you pull out of them? What other aspect from a QA perspective can they provide? Maybe they're the group that you go to help get, the trending. What are the customer insights? What do you see that's different now than it was maybe 6 months ago? Expand your QA program into utilizing that kind of experience to keep them engaged in what's going on.
Right. And keep them engaged, and there's so many new things coming out, too, because with monitoring calls being the most common practice, today we need to address multiple channels of communication. In addition to the phone, there's email, web chat, now there's social media, Twitter, Facebook, texting. I mean, it goes on and on. Not to mention new or changing laws and requirements regarding recording and storage of interactions. Lisa, what are your thoughts there?
There is a lot of technology that's out there that can help with that. And it as long as you know where you're going and what you want to accomplish, you can pretty much figure out, where is it that the technology is that's going to help you. I mean, there is all kinds of, analytic type software. There is just the recording software that you can have. As long as you know exactly what you're going for, that sort of software is going to be able to help you get there. And, again, that's where you need to make sure that you align with what your company's objectives are. Because if they want to know, they say, we're into all this social media. We want to know what's going on from the Twitter perspective or Facebook or whatever else might be out there. You have to look at it in a way of how are you going to capture that? That's probably not something that you're going to want to have somebody sit down and try to monitor or listen to. You're going to want to bring some technology in to help you out with that. And that's where you need to keep that open mind, know exactly where your company's going, what the objectives are, and you can tie that together to help you out.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're working on a project right now just with regard to the maturity level of technology for call centers. And in the future, more and more of it is going to be aimed at the things you were just talking about, the social media monitoring, using technology to filter through, thousands of communications electronically, and also just find patterns and positives, negatives, all that sort of thing, and then be able to drive that information back to the call center and ultimately, in certain cases, to the individual agent. So,
I know. We've come a long way. I remember the days when we had 3 or 4 tape recorders set up at everyone's desk just trying to, capture some interactions.
Yeah. No, things have come a long way. Well, we all agree there are many demands on call centers, not only to deliver that, really memorable customer experience, but improve customer loyalty, increase sales, share customer insights, all while reducing costs and increasing efficiencies. Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that as well?
I think what you need to do is really, and again, I'm going to go back to making sure that you've got a very well-defined strategy, because it's the senior leadership team that has to be able to see that your quality process is going to help achieve the goals of the organization. Because if you don't have that support, your QA process is going to stay siloed. And by aligning with those objectives, hopefully your QA objectives and your strategy is going to become more of the center strategy. And you're going to get the supervisors' help, and you're going to get workforce management to help out with you as well, because everyone's going to see how you're aligned. Let me just give you an example. The traditional approach to call monitoring is you listen to calls, evaluate them, score them, provide the feedback and coaching. The biggest challenge centers run into is there's no time to do it. Monitoring is important, but it's usually not urgent, so it gets pushed down on that list of priorities. Well, if you've aligned that process to what the goals and objectives are of the organization, you should be able to get some support. You need to look at, who is supposed to be doing the monitoring? Why is it getting pushed down on the low end of their priority list? If it's really important and it's going to help accomplish some goals, well, maybe you need to look at rearranging the accountabilities for an individual who's responsible for doing the monitoring. Maybe it requires the creation of a separate team. If you've aligned that goal to the business organizations, it's going to be easier to get the support you need. It could be perhaps maybe it's a matter of putting some measurements associated with it. People are going to do what they're measured on and what they're reviewed upon. So maybe there needs to be some measurements put into place and new accountability set up. None of that is, or I should say none of it, but it is going to be very hard to accomplish that if you're in your own little bubble and you haven't aligned yourself with your center and up onto the goals of the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to mention to everyone, too, that we're going to be opening this up to your questions, and so any listener who would like to press 1 on your phone and let Brian know you have a question, that'd be great, or write it in the chat area on Call Talk TV. And, Brian, do you have a question there for us that came in electronically?
I sure do, you guys. The first one is from Larry, and this is a long one. So how do you overcome agent resentment and get them to buy into the value of a quality program when nitpicky, big brother, and not fair are common perceptions? Good question.
Yes, very good question. Okay, what do we say to Larry on that one?
We've all heard it. You're looking for things. You're dinging me. I think the most important thing, and we touched on it briefly, is establishing that relationship first off. Establishing it to say, we're here to help you. We're not here just to get you down. But I think nitpicky, I think if we can talk about that a little bit, that becomes a struggle because I'm sure we've all been there, had those discussions and those arguments about how many times do you need to say a person's name in the phone call in order to get a scored, yes on your form? You don't want to get into discussions like that. You want to make sure what you're measuring really matters. If it doesn't matter, then why do you have it on your form? That's where you could get into trouble. I mean, I've even seen forms where, it can say, what was the pace, your articulation, everything that has to do with the vocal tone, and you're trying to measure each one of those things. That's where you can get stuck in that. It's really nitpicky. The agents don't see the value of where you're going with this, and you need to relook at your form and really make sure you've got that form set up and designed in a way that it communicates, here's the behavior, this is why we're doing it, this is what it sounds like, this is how we'd like you to do it. It has to be very well defined as to why you're rating them on all these things, or they are going to have resentment, and they're going to say, well, you're being too picky.
Right. Well, one other thing, too, Lisa, that we found, and Larry, this may be helpful to you, is that there's really 2 major categories of things that are on a typical scoring form. Those are the soft elements. That has to do with the relationship and the way you're treating the customer. And the other are the hard elements, or those things that have to do with policies. Is the information actually correct? That's what we call the hard elements. And if it's possible for you to have a post-call survey that is able to get driven right down to the agent level, and now there's inexpensive technology that allows you to do that, then it's really good because it takes off the plate all of those things that are oftentimes perceived as nitpicky in terms of the soft elements, because the customer is going to do that rating for you, leaving, of course, for quality assurance, the hard elements, which still have to be determined by the call center and can't be determined by the customer, because you could have made the customer very happy but told him or her exactly the wrong thing. So, but if you're able to take those things off the table, or mostly off the table by giving most of that work to the customer, well, after all, we'll do it for free. That's another way to attack the problem. Lisa, any comments on that before we go to our next one?
I just know that, when you are just dealing with the hard elements, it's so much faster. So it takes away some of the issues you have with time, because it's much easier to go through when you're just looking at the hard elements and not having to make a judgment as to whether somebody did something or didn't do something.
Right, and actually this is one of the things that you can use to convince your senior management that it's worth the price of the new technology needed to get these post-call surveys because, as Lisa's saying, it's the soft elements that monitors oftentimes end up going back and forth over and over again because they want to make sure that they get it right and don't get criticized by the agent. Whereas the hard elements, they can just go through once and they know whether something's been violated or not. So there is definitely a return on that investment that can be calculated more or less accurately and brought to senior management. So that's one of the things you might want to do. Brian, you've got some fresh questions.
I sure do, and I want to thank all of our listeners for taking the time to ask some great questions here. This next one comes from Tara W. Question is, do you think putting a number as a score is the best way to show how an agent has performed on a call?
Boy,
so what do you think?
Well, I think numbers are good from a measurement standpoint because it allows you to see trending. But from my personal, I guess, opinion would be, I just like to say, yes or no. Did you do it or did you not do it? And not give a score of like a 1, 2, or a 3 on whether or not you did this particular, skill or behavior that you've identified. It's subjective enough, and it's just, to me, easier to say, yes, you did it, or no, you didn't do it. But on the other hand, you have to make sure that you're very calibrated within your team so everyone is seeing that in the same way. So I like an overall score. I like to be able to measure how you did. But from an individual score, looking at the individual categories of the skills and behaviors, it's pretty much more of a yes, no is my preference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think you covered the bases pretty well there. I mean, there's pluses and minuses to both sides. And I know some centers will also use the ABCD type of thing because we're used to that in terms of scoring back from when in school. But, of course, letters either have to be turned into numbers in order to be, averaged, or else it's best just to use the number if you need to get that information and to be able to use trending information, as you indicated.
Right.
So good. Hopefully, Tara, that gives you something to chew on, and so that you can sort of take it to your situation and make the best choice.
Yeah, if I could add one thing to that as well, Bruce, if you wouldn't mind. If you're going to have more than one score that you can provide to something like an A, B, C, or D, or a, does not meet expectations, meets some expectations, exceeds expectations, you have to make sure you define for the agents what each one of those is like. And that can be very time-consuming. And, again, that's where you fall back into that you're very nitpicky and can start working on that negative culture again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah, and another reason where, if at all possible, you can lay off the soft elements onto the customer. That's the best thing. And, of course, the thing that's nice, too, is if you do a post-call survey, you're able to get those numerical feedback numbers, but then also an open-ended question at the end, which we consider best practices, which is, do you have any other comments on the call, or what is one thing we could have done to improve the quality of the call? Then all that brought back to the agent really does have much more of a sense of trying to develop the agent and make the agent as good as possible for the customer and not just simply for the monitor, if you will.
Right. And the customer feedback seems to be much more believable than if it's,
right,
someone sitting across the room listening to my phone call and evaluating it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Brian, we've got another one?
That's right. We've got one of our listeners from